Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. It's good to be with you. Thanks for joining us. All eyes are on Georgia as the clock counts down to the state's crucial Senate runoffs. More than 3 million votes have already been cast in the election, which will determine the balance of power in the Senate. President-elect Biden campaigned in Atlanta Monday afternoon for Democratic challengers Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock. Georgia's runoff election will happen a day before Congress meets to certify Mr. Biden's election victory. The meeting is usually a quick formality, but this year it could become a drawn-out process as Republicans in both the House and Senate say they will challenge the electoral results from several battleground states. For his part, President Trump is also campaigning in Georgia on Monday. He's stumping for the state's incumbent senators, Republicans David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler. But the president's efforts to turn out Republican voters come as top GOP officials in the state are fuming over a phone call he made this weekend. During that call, the president pressured Georgia's Republican Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, to, quote, find the votes to throw out Joe Biden's victory. The call has drawn criticism from Democrats and even some Republicans from across the country. For more on the Georgia runoffs, CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns joins us now. Hi there, Caitlin. So set the stage for us in Georgia right now. What are both parties doing to pick up last-minute support?
Hi, Elaine. Happy New Year. But the 2020 campaign is continuing into this new year. And to show kind of how high the stakes are here in Georgia, you have both President Trump and President-elect Biden here in the state campaigning for their respective party candidates. And both sides have been, over the past couple of months, really, since this runoff started, have been urging their voters to turn out early. They had 3 weeks of early voting here in Georgia, or to vote absentee. You can vote absentee without an excuse here in the state. Now, however, early voting has ended, and all the focus has been on making sure every last voter turns out tomorrow in these key races. Both sides have been emphasizing how critical these races are, because for Democrats, this will determine how much Biden can actually get done if he has allies in the Senate. And for Republicans, they see this, in their words, as the last line of defense against Democrats in control.
Well, as we mentioned, this all comes after President Trump's weekend phone call with Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. The president claimed it's Raffensperger's fault that Republicans won't go out and vote Tuesday. CBS Evening News anchor and managing editor Norah O'Donnell asked Raffensperger about that in an interview Monday. I want to go ahead and play his response. Let's listen.
The fault really lies at the people that disparaged, the whole process of voting. First off, the challenge that one political party had is that they said, do not vote absentee, and people listened to that. And then they said, well, the machines aren't accurate, and you don't know if you can trust your vote. And so a lot of people just stayed away from the polls. At the end of the day, people need to turn out to vote. The machines are safe, secure, and we're going to have an accurate election count. We'll know who won this race, and I hope that as a Republican, we turn out our people. But when you diminish the results and disparage the results that we had in November for Georgia for president, that discourages Republicans to come out and vote for the senators. That's just the fact.
So, Caitlin, how has Georgia's Republican Party been trying to assure voters, and do we expect the president's comments to make an impact Tuesday?
Well, their efforts to turn out voters are certainly complicated by the president's messaging, because they need his supporters to turn out in a runoff. Runoff races typically have lower turnout than general elections, especially ones that happen at odd times of the year. And so on one hand, you've had the president undermining the results of the election and messing with the Republicans' messaging, which has been trying to just keep voters focused on the task at hand, which is turning out people people for these runoffs. On the other hand, however, they are trying to be careful not to alienate the president or show any distance from him because they need his supporters to turn out and support them. So the challenge for Republicans has been increasing, and Republicans are kind of anxious about what the president will say at his rally when he comes to Georgia tonight. They want him to stay on message and focus on turning out his supporters, but they also know that the president, of course, is prone to going off message, and this could be his last rally as president, and we know that he has liked to spend this time airing grievances, as he has been doing, focused on the last election and not so much about this one. I will say, however, that voters that we have talked to, we were here before the holidays, we're back again. Republicans that we've talked to say that they had already voted or plan to vote, and these are Republicans who agree with the president's rhetoric and messaging, even though those claims, of course, are completely unfounded. They still believe that they need to turn out and vote. So we'll see whether the president's call with Raffensperger does anything to discourage those voters. And Republicans have really been counting on election day turnout. And so does that have any effect on those last-minute voters they need to reach to turn out tomorrow?
So both Senate races are expected to be close. Why is that, Caitlin? Is it partly because of what you just laid out, perhaps some of the mixed messaging that we were hearing on the Republican side?
The polls show a close race, but it's really difficult to determine who actually shows up in a runoff. There have already been record numbers. 3 million people have already voted. But elections in Georgia are going to be close, given how this state has changed. The presidential election here was determined by fewer than 12,000 votes. That's a pretty close race when you consider the margins. And when you look at the Senate races here, you know, the reason that we have a runoff in both of these races is because no candidate was able to get 50%, but even the margins have been narrow. So Democrats and Republicans have been telling us that they think this race is very close. It comes down to every last voter, and that it's really more about base elections, not so much about trying to persuade other voters to come over to your side, but trying to turn out your base of support and try and defeat the other side.
All right, so Caitlin, the question I think a lot of folks are wondering, when could we get final results for Georgia?
Well, Elaine, I have not yet booked a return flight because we have been advised that it could take a little while, but I'm hoping that it won't take as long as it did in the general election. But here are a couple of things to consider. First, here in Georgia, you can start processing ballots before Election Day. Remember, in states like Pennsylvania, the reason that we saw a delay or the reason that we saw why it took so long to count votes is because in that state and some others, you couldn't start opening up those ballots until that day. Here in Georgia, they're allowed to process the ballots before Election Day, and they have actually mandated this time around that they start doing that a week before. However, there are still about 400,000 absentee ballots left out there that they're expecting to be returned, so that could contribute to it taking a little bit longer to process. But we've been advised to kind of, hold on. Again, this doesn't mean anything nefarious. It just takes a while to count these votes, especially when you have such high turnout as they are expecting.
All right, we'll get the coffee ready. Caitlin Huey-Burns, thanks to you and your intrepid producer as well, Sean. You've been here, there, and everywhere for us. Really appreciate it, Caitlin. Thank you.